It was warm when we first moved in. It is, okay, now it's not, so some will figure it out. Okay, good evening. And welcome to the Town Council Business Meeting. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And hopefully we will get the temperature worked out. Before we start, I would like to take this moment to thank B.J. Reeves. In case you aren't aware, his last day is the end of March. He is leaving his service to the town as our senior planner. And I want to thank you for your dedication. Director of Planning, whatever you are.
Happy to be here, that's what I am.
Whatever, I'm just glad you're there. Yes, like. Yeah, this year.
2025.
No, in 2030, is that. This has gotten to be a really serious thing, just typical of our relationship. I want to thank you for your dedication, your professionalism, and your knowledge and understanding of the ordinances, the permits, and the UDO, and the long-range plan, and blah, 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 blah. You embrace this community, and this community has embraced you. I've been on non-council meetings with you, and job well done. You've always been the brightest and the tallest in the group. And I wish you the very best to you and your family as you move into another phase of your life. And I'm sure that we will be working together in other endeavors. But thank you, BJ. Now we're as tall as you are. We're sitting down. This is great. Okay. And now I'm turning the meeting over to our town manager.
Thank you, Mayor Haney. I'll just quickly ditto your comments. BJ and I had an opportunity to speak at length last week, and I certainly thank him for all of his service to the town and wish him all the best in his future endeavors. You will be missed, and you have served valiantly through sometimes some very lengthy and difficult meetings, so thank you. The first thing I would like to do this evening, Mayor, is ask the council to please motion to remove item 5F from the consent agenda and reschedule it as 6B and an action item, as staff has some updates literally as of the last hour or so, and would like to have an opportunity to update council on that, and I'll gladly explain when we get to 6B why I've asked for this removal. But if I could request a removal of that 5F from the agenda, which of course were the budget amendments relative to the pickleball courts.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we move item 5F on the agenda to 6B.
Second.
Aye.
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 Just I don't know if it's a reminder or just an acknowledgement also relative to 6A, which is the YMCA topic that we discussed a little bit at length at the agenda last week. The only item that you are being asked to adopt this evening is the resolution in the packet that is a resolution of intent. That will allow us then to advertise for 10 days that the council may very well enter into an agreement transferring the property. The draft document is in your packet, but you are not approving that draft this evening. We will bring back a final document once all of those details are worked out. So just want to make that clear. When you get to 6A, you are only being asked to adopt the resolution of intent.
Okay.
Third item I have ahead of the agenda is that you will note on your agenda this evening that it says that the public hearing for SU 0622 has been canceled. The applicant did withdraw that application via email to the planning department yesterday. There may be a representative here this evening if there's any questions around that, but just in the event somebody in the audience is only here to hear the application for SU 0622, just advance notice that it has been withdrawn and there will be no hearing this evening. And then the final item I have is that I spoke with Dr. Murphy this afternoon and would just remind council that last week, I think actually in the middle of the agenda meeting, you were all sent an updated resolution relative to the request from the West Southern Pines community, where Dr. Murphy had presented some proposed amendments. I would ask that all of you take a look at that, and we will go ahead and agenda it for the work session and finalization of that document later, hopefully finalization of that document later this month. So just a reminder that you have that. There was some question about whether it was going to be heard this evening or not, and speaking with Paul, I think he would ask that we go ahead and take that up at the work session here in a couple weeks. And
Okay.
did I cover everything with that, or would you like to add anything?
Not at all. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Your consent agenda is everything that we went over last Tuesday evening, I'm sorry. Budget amendment relative to a demolition that you had approved earlier this year over on Clark Street. Again, we do not budget funds in advance of those demolitions. We simply ask the council to move the money once it becomes an issue that we would have to move it because you actually vote to do those demolitions. You have 2 appointments to the Library Advisory Board, a resident exemption from curbside solid waste collection. This, again, was the conversation you had with Ms. Roth last Wednesday relative to what will become an extension of the GFL contract. We are working on that extension. I think the language is just about finalized, and I would hope to have that in front of you for approval and finalization at your April council meeting. The interlocal agreement with Moore County, Mobile 311 GIS or 311. This, again, is where Moore County is hosting some data for us, and we certainly appreciate them doing that. And then 3 sets of council meeting minutes from February of 2023. And again, we have moved that last budget amendment, or 5F, on your agenda for discussion here momentarily. So with that, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'm looking for a motion unless you
I
have
will
questions.
move to approve the consent agenda.
There's I have no problem with the consent agenda, but for the fact that Riley, and I didn't catch it before, Riley Bowman's name is Rylee on the February 28th, Tuesday, February 28th minutes, and she shows that the council roundtable discussion is Riley, Riley. So if we could fix that, that would be amazing. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Otherwise, yes, I'm on board. Aye.
Okay. I need the approval.
All right.
We got a motion.
The motion would be to approve them as amended? Okay, then who did, when someone second?
I second.
Okay, then yes, aye.
Aye. Very good. Turning the page.
All right, again, action item 6A is considering resolution
Oh,
1040.
can I go back just a
Public
step?
comments?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're not, I just forgot public comments, and that was my fault. I also, yeah, I do want to thank the people who have volunteered to go on the advisory board, because that is a very important part of our community, is people who volunteer and give up their time and their talents, and I do want to thank those too. So we will back up the truck again and go into public comments. Remember, it's a 3-minute deal. Anybody for public comments? Just come forward, state your name and your address, and we'll start your 3.
My first word. I'm Dot Brower, 102 Eastman Road.
Wait a minute, I don't think you're on.
I was chilling, I think my voice is okay.
That is was. Sorry.
While I can still say this, happy Women's History Month to those of you who sew, and thank you to the men who were so bright to hire the women and to elect the women. It has been said that don't believe all of what you read in the newspaper. Well, these days I do, and I have the practice of reading between the lines. I know you know that our children's education is on the line. They have to be taught the truth and to be treated fairly and to be educated in a non-toxic environment. Now, what does this have to do with town council? No, this is not a school board meeting, but this is a town matter, and this is a citizen matter. We are the best advocates for our children. I don't know who from this board may be appointed to the school board. I do know we have some appointments to the county, to the commissioners. But I am asking you as a board or as individuals to please be advocates for our children. I don't think I have to tell you why, but a lot is at stake. And what is at stake in my eyes is teaching the truth to our children. No, I don't have children, but every child is mine. And I have a responsibility to each child that they get the very best education and they are prepared when they leave here to compete and to be told the truth. It's critical race truth. So let's remember that. And please, as I say, as you can, advocate and be a voice for our children, to our school board, and to others in the community who are doubting that they are or are not getting the best education in our public schools. Martin Luther King said, intelligence plus character, that is the goal of the education, of a true education. But I really like something that Attorney Ben Crump has said recently. We must fight for our children. We must fight for our children always. We must fight until hell freezes. And when that happens, we fight on the ice. So put your skates on.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Michelle Peel, and I represent the Southern Pines Pickleball Association. I'm also accompanied by Kathy Samakas, who serves as our treasurer, and Carol Henderson, who serves as our president. I'm secretary. Anyway, the only reason we came tonight is to thank you for your consideration for the pickleball courts and the improvements to those, the growth to those, because pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the United States. When my husband was traveling, he stopped by an airport bar and saw on the TV professional pickleball, and he about fell out. Because at that point, I was just like, I'm going to play pickleball. And he's like, oh boy, just an old lady thing, But he realized it wasn't just an old lady thing. It's a big deal. And so anyway, we just want to say thank you for your consideration. Our group is more than willing to help at any juncture. We want to be an asset and a help to Cindy. And that's all we are. We're here to run errands, to do legwork, whatever. So please give us your thorough and true consideration. And thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else? A voice from the past.
What I hear now.
That's true.
My name is Marsh Smith. I live at 568 Santee Road. And last night, the Moore County Wildlife and Conservation Club had a board meeting and the board members met. The club was incorporated in 1961, but it dates back to the 20s. It's basically a rod and gun club out on Camp Easter Road. And one of the club's founding members was David Drexel. He gave some of the land that now makes up the Wildlife Club's property. And David, as most of you all know, lived at Whitehall, which the town acquired recently. And so the board had this resolution that the board wanted me to deliver to the town council. And I'll read it. It shouldn't take long. Whereas the Moore County Wildlife and Conservation Club is a nonprofit corporation organized under the laws of North Carolina and dedicated to protecting the natural resources of the area and facilitating both its members and the general public's enjoyment of the same. And whereas Moore County Wildlife and Conservation Club has a current membership of 523 families, with most members residing in Moore County and many members residing in the town of Southern Pines. Whereas, although the club traces its organizational roots back to the 1920s, it incorporated its current corporate framework in 1961 when its incorporators filed the corporate documents with the North Carolina Secretary of State. Whereas David Drexel was one of the club's founding members, and whereas the town recently acquired the Whitehall tract, which was David's home until shortly before his death, and whereas the town has undertaken to get public input regarding the public use of Whitehall, and whereas Whitehall has supported the enjoyment of nature with walking trails for both people and dogs for many decades and through several owners, and is a quiet place without undue noise or disturbances. Now, therefore, the Moore County Wildlife and Conservation Club resolves as follows. Number one, the Whitehall tract should be left in as natural a state as possible to facilitate its enjoyment by the public. While the club recognizes that the town intends to allow all citizens the opportunity to enjoy Whitehall, great importance attaches to not destroying the enjoyment of nature presently available at Whitehall, not destroying it with overdevelopment. The existing Whitehall trails should be left in their present natural state to the greatest extent possible. Paved trails at Whitehall should be avoided or at least minimized. And finally, the town should avoid uses at Whitehall which adversely impinge on native wildlife, natural processes typifying the sandhills, such as controlled burns, and the quiet surroundings. This, the 13th day of March, 2023, yesterday. And I'd just like to hand this up.
Yes, if you would. Thank you. Any other public comments?
None for me.
I know, because your time's up. Anyone else? Now we'll go back to the agenda since we're kind of jumping around anyway, aren't we? No, I didn't help. I was with you. So okay, we're now to the action item. This is the, consider the resolution of 1042 to convey the property to the YMCA. And as Reagan mentioned, this is just a resolution of intent only. And the draft will be in the future when we can get the language cleared up and cleaned up, I guess. Is that what you're saying to me, Mac, without saying anything?
Yes.
So I'm looking for a motion.
A follow-up question, Mac, that I think you would be the best one to ask. Mr. Pate Wisely mentioned an issue regarding the time limitation on any contracts in the future. And while I don't even know that that's relevant at this point, I wondered where we are with that and where you are with research as far as whether or not that could be land that passed in perpetuity to, or would it pass back to us if the Y eventually obtained the land and then wanted to sell it? Would it pass back to the town? How are we coming with that?
Finish the research, and to the extent that I understand the rule against perpetuity, we could probably have a maximum length that's feasible condition of 90 years.
90? Okay.
Okay.
And any contract that we entered into would say as much, I assume. Although maybe Mr. Pate wants to, go for it. You have your mic on?
No, I mean, my understanding was we would have this discussion in a public forum when we're actually looking at the resolution, or is tonight the time to have that discussion of the details?
Mr. Parsons, I think you plan to put this on for a vote at the
Right. Business meeting.
So we discussed at the agenda.
This is just the intent.
I will offer that, I know, Bill, you and I had briefly discussed this, and you had talked about looking maybe for 50 years, or
Yeah.
I would simply ask if council's got a strong desire to see the full 90, or if 50 is the magic number, just for purposes of being able to agree to the Y on the language before putting it in front of you for a final vote, if there is a desire for something other than the maximum, or at any direction, whether this evening or following this evening in the coming week or so, that would be helpful from our standpoint of finalizing a document.
Yeah, I mean, I was okay, 50 plus. I mean, I felt like 25 was a little bit short.
Yeah.
But if 50 goes by, they're probably pretty well established at that point.
And since you're the one that brought it up,
But if y'all want to go to the full, I don't know what to.
Well, I'm interested in I'm obviously interested in maximizing that as far as protecting the town as long as possible. However, I'm also interested in, and I'm really asking a legal question that is way outside of any expertise I ever had, but I know that, for example, Vail, Colorado is on land owned by the national park, and the land itself is leased to the town. And I'm wondering if that's, number one, possible, number two, has been any consideration, whether or not we could just lease the land, and maybe that's a question for Mac or Reagan, or, okay.
And feel free to correct me at any point along the way, because I'm going to try to be less than legal about it and just say that from the very early stages, there was discussion around transferal, potential land leases. Once some of the fundraising began and some of the individuals were brought to the table, the Y expressed a concern with being able to raise funds on leased land as opposed to holding the fee simple title to the land. And there was some discussion even at the council level back in those early stages when that was occurring. So it was a consideration. I understand there are mechanisms under which something like that could be put together, but it didn't seem it was going to work on this particular project from the standpoint of the Y and their fundraising and building. So.
Did they present any evidence that that had been a deterrent in regard to potential fundraising, or did they just say that was the concern they had?
They did not provide us anything in a written format, but it goes along with some of the past discussions around Ys that have taken place on other sites and things. It wasn't terribly surprising at the time that they said it, but no, I didn't get anything specifically from them that said, I'm willing to give you $200,000, but only if you own the land and aren't leasing it, something like that, just to be oversimplified.
The discussion?
No, I'd love to see a land lease as an option, though. I don't know that we let the Y determine all of the conditions of us passing land to them as a gift.
Is that done at this point, or is that when we do the draft?
Well, and it's, to be clear, it's no longer a gift pass along. There's a very small minimal amount involved in the purchase. But I don't, Mac.
So
The process is slightly different if we're going to
Yeah.
lease it for longer than 10 years than the process that we're currently following to sell it to them in a private sale.
But the private sale value is very, very far under market, am I correct?
Yes.
Like, not even worth mentioning, am I also, is that something that you guys can say out loud in the interest of transparency?
In the packet, the current draft agreement talks about $5,000.
Right,
It's
so the
it's a
Y-
menial amount, but it makes it a purchase as opposed to a gift.
And I have a concern.
That's entirely fair. I think all Mac is saying is that if the question is that something we can address at the stage of the
Draft.
agreement itself? The bottom line is, if the desire is to go back and talk about a lease, it's an entirely different legal process.
Right.
And this, we don't need a vote on this evening. We need to set it aside, I think, and go back to the table with the Y to determine whether a lease is a possibility, if that's the desire of the majority of council. Because to pass this evening, and which is all about the conveyance of the property.
Right,
Right. Means we're going to go advertise it, which, we could do and then never actually convey it, but we'd be restarting another process relative to leasing the land.
right.
Anyone else interested in a lease situation?
I feel like a 90 or 99-year lease should not cause fundraising issues. Only from talking about going onto property with a school, we talked about funding and it wasn't an issue. I don't want to delay the process, but at the same time, it's probably worth looking at if the Y is even willing to move forward with a lease. There were terms within this agreement. Matt, can you remind me of, there were certain expectations that if they met those expectations, the land would continue to be theirs, otherwise it would revert back to us. Can you remind me of those?
The real condition is that they have to maintain it as a YMCA for the length of time that you determine, 50 years, 90 years, whatever you determine. But the rest of the provisions are basically requirements that in exchange for getting a very below market price, they have to agree to do things that provide services to the community.
A lot of the individual items were simply sort of, they were tied to dates and they were targets to make sure that progress was being made, so that if in fact the conveyance took place, that off the top of my head, I think it talks about getting an occupancy permit and operating by December 31st of 2027. But prior to that, there are dates in there about site plan, architectural plan, so that if in fact it were to be transferred, you're not sitting and waiting for 5 years with nothing happening before the town can pull that land back, which was the intent in those sort of benchmarks along the way.
I feel like the YMCA is a huge benefit to the town. I'm inclined to approve this transfer of property at the given price purely for the sake of moving forward. I think a long lease may maintain something, in years to come, but I think that it is important that we get to the YMCA. I don't want it to not happen in exchange for a lease that we end up with.
So you're fine with
It was
residence of
important as it is.
intent for the 90-year lease?
Yeah, and we're just advertising it, and we're going to get community feedback, yeah.
Conveyance, sorry,
Fee
not
simple
lease, excuse me,
determinable
wrong
period.
term.
We want to run the risk of losing this opportunity. You know, the reality is that, we certainly want to be amenable to the needs of the town. But I think that as we define the town, and consider that just 2 weeks ago, young lady riding down the road had a gun pulled on her from some kids walking out in the middle of the road. These types of opportunities can help to socially alleviate certain problems, and to play around with that urgent timing, I think would be possibly insensitive on our part.
I would mirror all those comments, and I do also think the analysis is a little bit different. When we go into long-term favorable leases for a building that was already in existence, I can't see them going into a land lease where they're going to spend several $1 million and never, ever own the thing. I don't know, I doubt that they would meet that with favorability, maybe. But if we can get the terms of the fee simple determinable long enough to give us some security as an entity, as a town, I'd be comfortable moving forward.
90?
Yeah, I mean, 50, 90, at that point, it's
I'm
kind of all
I'm
all
just
the same.
impressed that this amazing, caring, community-focused organization wants to come to Southern Pines. And their vision is to impact youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility, serving this community and our citizens. This extraordinary nonprofit has been around for over 170 years, and I'm excited to bring the YMCA to our community with all the services they offer, from soup to nuts, as they say. So I'm looking for someone to make a motion to approve the resolution of intent.
I'll make a motion per item 6A to approve the resolution of intent for further discussion at next month's meeting. Is that proper?
Second.
Pleasure of the council.
Is the term in that resolution? I'm trying to remember, I read the full resolution last week before that meeting, so I want to make sure that if we are changing the term of it,
No, the term, I believe, is in the draft agreement.
okay,
that
which we're not
will have to
approving
be-
that.
Yeah.
Okay, then yes.
Yeah,
then I
all this
agree.
resolution is saying is we're making an intent, it gets advertised for 10 days, then the agreement will be at some point after that. And it doesn't have to be next month if we don't immediately come to terms.
10
but-
days after
But it's sometime
application.
after we've stated the intent.
Okay, good. Then yes, aye.
Aye.
One of the terms that we'll advertise is the length of the determinable lease,
Okay.
the determinable fee. Is it 50 or 90?
I'd prefer 90, and I don't know that any, I mean, does anybody have an argument against 90? Why wouldn't you do the maximum?
We can always come back, I guess, depending, but yeah, 90 is fine.
If we say
That's-
90 and if they have an issue with 90, then we will rediscuss. But I think we ask for 90.
With 90, I have an issue.
I'm good with either,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. I'm good with either
Yeah,
one.
that's fine.
90.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our next action item that has been moved from one side of the page to the other, looking at an ordinance for 2059 and 2060, a budget recreation amendment for $32,000. This is in reference to the pickleball.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. And the reason I asked to have this pulled from the consent agenda is following our conversation last Wednesday, staff went back and started contacting contractors and trying to see if we could move this project along just out of the off chance that a window was going to open up or something. We are still awaiting at least one, if not two, bids or prices, and this is an informal process. It does not reach the area where we have to put it in a newspaper and all that, but they are getting multiple quotes on this. And to date, none of the quotes are coming in at 32. And quite honestly, one quote that we did get, which was from a vendor who had provided a 32 figure back in the fall when we first started talking about the project, the increase for that particular vendor was a result of a fencing subcontractor. They were not increasing their portion of the work, but because of some changes in subcontractors. So what I would ask consideration for is that the 32 simply become 40. I don't want to say what the lowest quote is we received to date because we want the one or two we're waiting on to be honest with what they're bringing in. So I'm going to be fully transparent about that. But staff is, I am told staff is very confident we can get a contractor for less than 40, but we don't feel so good about getting a 32 quote at this time. So that's why I asked to have this conversation and, you know.
And I certainly support that, making it a $40,000 offering, but I also need to back up as far as constituents have been told it was 32, and they have detrimentally relied on that to the extent that they have raised 16. So when we get to a user agreement, I would like to not say to constituents, oh, by the way, you now have to raise 20. So I think if,
Absolutely not the intent. 32 was an estimate, again, back in the fall.
Right.
And honestly, that user agreement, they're working on that, and
Right.
they're taking a look at it a little bit differently. It is moving along very well, but it will be very much along the lines of what would you call it? A long-term, regular rental sort of thing. So, yeah, there would not be the intent, at least on staff's part. I mean, council can feel differently and act differently and ask for more in order to advance the project. But it was not the intent whatsoever it was never stated as 50%.
Right,
It
okay.
just sort of became
So-
50% based
Right.
upon representations that were made and then the quote that was received. And so that's not at all what I came to discuss.
right, so I'm totally on board with 40,000 if that's where you feel confident. I don't want to do anything to stop the process, but I also am committed to what constituents have been told and what the association has been told, was to raise 16,000 with the understanding that that is their portion regardless of what the bid comes in.
It was 15,000 that was sort of mentioned or referenced or offered to Cindy that started that conversation. It became
Okay.
16 when we got the 32 quote, and that looked
Right.
like a clean 50-50 split. And
Okay.
so
Yeah, Bill, you're trying to.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable. Whether we pay 16 or 24, I'm on board with moving
Okay,
it forward.
great.
So I need a motion, people.
may I ask, please make that motion to approve ordinances 2059 and 2060 based upon a $40,000 figure. And that
Yes.
way we can clean
Right,
it up.
right.
Reagan, we had the conversations with the bidders.
And that's part of the reason I brought this in and am moving it forward for discussion this evening versus just saying pull it and let's come back at work session, because the quotes we are receiving vary in length of viability, and sometimes it's 2 weeks, sometimes it's 30 days. So I was looking to try and move it forward this evening. Otherwise, we're going to be going back and getting new quotes. Part of what staff is also asking for as we receive these quotes is availability. So if, the rule on this is that you can select the most responsive bidder, which is to say that if somebody tells us it's going to be 36 and an equally quality bidder tells us it's 36, but we can't get to it until November, and an equally responsive or an equally qualified bidder says, well, it's 36.5, but we have a crew available in May, we can take that into account and take the 36.5 bid sort of thing. So again, I don't want to get into too many details of those informal bids we have received to date, just to be fair to all bidders.
Do you feel like you need any wiggle room beyond 40,000?
Based on what I'm being told, no. Have you seen anything, Jessica, with working with Cindy?
We were getting updates as late as 5:30 this afternoon, and based on that, we did not feel we need more than 40. I mean, honestly, what had us go back and double and kind of triple check was when we got a quote for 72,000, and we had another for 42,000, and that got me concerned. So we've been doing this very, very quickly, but we've also tried to come back to you with what we feel is reasonable. We hope we might even be able, with approval tonight, to be able to execute a contract, this week, next week. So I feel like we will know very quickly if 40 is not enough, and we can obviously pause and come back. So
For 40, I feel like the scope of this work is existing tennis courts, adding nets that are permanent, repainting, adding minimal fencing probably between them for 4 total courts. I would say $10,000 per court, I would say is my
At 72,
threshold.
I would suggest we pull this all together and it's,
Yeah, question for wording. Do you want the motion to be up to 40 or
well,
40?
what you're doing is you're transferring $40,000 to the capital project fund, so it is specific to 40.
that's in the recreation project fund. So if we don't spend 40, then there's, a little bit left
And
for
just
another
out of
recreation.
curiosity, the person who was suggesting 72, is there something extra that they see necessary? Oh, okay.
You will occasionally see that with bids. They'll give you a number because they're busy and they don't need the work. And if you say yes to the number, they'll excitedly try to figure out a way to do it. But
Gotcha.
we see that all the time. I mean, even on large projects, large paving projects, we'll get 3 bids that are within $20,000 one another on a $500,000 contract, and then one will come in that is $300,000 higher. But they take the chance that maybe they're the only bidder, or that you'll select them, and it's not unusual in this type of activity and work.
All right, if there are no further comments, I will make a motion to approve ordinance 2059 and 2060 to amend fiscal year 22-23 budget for recreation improvements for the allocation of $40,000 from fund balance appropriations transferred to the recreation improvements capital fund for the tennis court conversion at Memorial Park for pickleball.
Second.
Pleasure of the council.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yay, very good. Go pickle and have fun. That being said, again, I would like to thank BJ. We do appreciate all that you've done, and I'm looking for a motion.
I have one more thing before we adjourn, sorry.
Okay.
So I messed up. I did not compare my council calendar to my work calendar to my family calendar. And I now have a conflict when we're supposed to do our budget retreat. I will be out of town. And so either if we're too late to notice another date, I can just get called up if the 4 of you do it. Or if we're not too late, I think we're scheduled for the 13th. I could do it the 10th, 11th, or 12th, but I'm supposed to be away the 13th. If that's messing you up from what you've noticed, just tell me. Oh, you haven't noticed?
Yeah, it does not. But yeah, notice is not a problem still at this point. I would only offer amongst those dates, please remember that April 11th is your regular business meeting at 6 PM. I hope we are done by 6 PM, but I don't know that you want to double up meetings that day either, so.
Calendar, so you're saying the 13th doesn't work for you?
Yeah, I'm aware.
Okay, okay, but 10 on 12, okay.
Yeah.
Work.
And if you don't have an answer this evening and want to go home and check your calendars and
Okay.
such, there's time to
What
do that, so.
I can, yeah, I will be out of town from the 5th through the 10th, and you will be out of town from the 2nd to the 6th.
2nd to the 6th.
Okay.
But the 11th would work for me perfectly.
So 11th or 12th, but we do have a meeting on the 11th.
Again, I'm just reminding you of that,
Okay.
that you'll be going from your retreat to coming back here at 6 o'clock and
I guess
doing whatever
just-
council meeting there is, which maybe you just want to call it an entire day and do that, but.
That's a
if-
lot of love
If it turns
for
out to be
one day.
one of those
Yeah.
hearings until 11 or 12
12-hour
kind of
one.
days.
So we don't want to do that again.
What I'll do, I'll send an email out to the group tomorrow. Just check your messages for that day. And
Okay.
if we can move it, great. If not,
The 11th or 12th.
yes.
What,
You should send that message. I don't think you can send a message to group text or group message. That's okay. You can send it. Yeah.
Evil, evil man.
What we're doing, so send me your availability that week and I'll line them up.
Okay. Great, thank you.
That's good. And I had one more thing I wanted to say, and that was, I think periodically, I mean, there can't be a big enough shout out to BJ for all that he's done, but periodically there's a town employee who just is exemplary. And Archie Daniel has been that person. In the last 2 weeks, I have gotten phone calls from constituents thanking me for Archie Daniel. And I just think when we get happy phone calls, it's pretty important to share that. And I hope that somebody lets him know that people are talking behind his back and it's all good. And I appreciate him. So thank you.
We will definitely deliver that message.
Anything else? Well, y'all enjoy this wonderful spring, winter weather. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Aye.
Aye.
Stand adjourned.
Good, I thought